Hey, this is Lee Waller, and I am in Unreal Engine 5.6 working in the motion design tools. I'm going to take a look at creating grids, these honeycomb type hexagon shaped grids that are used in many designs. I found two ways that work really well in creating these. There's pros and cons to both, so I'll explore that in this tutorial. The two different ways, one is using a material and some textures to create the look. The other is using shapes, either 2D or 3D shapes, and cloners. I'll start with the material. To do that, I'm going to need a 2D shape, so I'm going to go up here to the rectangle and just double click. That'll drop a rectangle in, and let's make sure that's selected. We can go to the details, and I'm going to increase the size of this. So right here on the mesh size, I'm going to make sure that's set to free, and then on the X, I'll set that to 5,000. Jump over to the Y and maybe set that up to 3,000. Doesn't really matter on that, just as long as we have something to work with. We will create a material for this, but before we do that, I'm going to import two textures real quick. I'll go into the content drawer, and right there on the content folder, I've created two folders, one for materials that we'll use in just a few minutes, and the one for the textures that we're going to import real quick. If you want to set up these folders, it's very easy. Just right click in this area and go to new folder, add them in, and label them. Once you have those folders, I'm going to open up textures and import my textures in there. So again, we'll just right click inside of that folder, import to current folder, and here's my two textures. I'll make these available down in the description for you to download. You can import those in, just hit open, and they'll come in and they're available to us now. I'll go back and we can start creating the material for this. So make sure you're on the rectangle, go into the details for it right here in material. We'll go to simple and select it and then go to material designer. That's going to open up our material designer. There's the PBR. We'll work with it. Just click continue on it. Here in the global settings, we're going to make one change. We'll drop down to the blend mode, change this from opaque to masked. Now what that should do is add the opacity mask channel up here, but it's not doing that. I'm working in 5.6.1 and I don't know if this is a glitch or something in that version, but what I'm going to do is just close out the material designer real quick, go back to that rectangle, and right here where it says edit with material designer, click on it. It opens up the material designer and there you'll see that opacity mask channel has been added. So let's go in there. And right here on the first layer, let's click on that mask option. And down here on the texture for it, let's select this, open it up, and we'll search for that grid texture. Let's work with the first one right there at the top. That adds it in, and you immediately see the change that is making not only to the material, but to the shape itself. In the black areas of this texture, and let me open that up real quick. You'll see that this is made up of white and black, and all the outlines are black. And so those areas are going to be invisible, and then any of the white areas are going to be visible. Close that out, and you see that reflected in the material and in the shape. Let me just move that around a little bit, and you can see through that grid now. The other channels can also be used to help shape the material and the look that you want. I'm just going to go into the base color. And right here on the texture, I'm going to change that from texture to a solid color. And down here in the color swatch, I'll click on it and then just choose a color up here. Once I have that color, we'll just hit OK. And that's all I'm going to do for this material at this time. I'm going to save this. So go right up here and click, and we'll save as new material. And I'm going to go into my materials folder right there and then label this grid _01 and save. And now we can close out the material designer. Our material is applied to the shape, and you can see that it is creating the look that we want. Now to adjust the size of this or the numbers of the hexagons, we can go back into, make sure you're still on that rectangle. We'll go down here to the material and go to the Material UV, open that up. And right here on the scale, we can begin to adjust it. Now this kind of works backwards from what I was expecting. I'm going to go ahead and set this scale back to X and Y so those are constrained together. And I want to make these hexagons smaller, so I was thinking that we would scale it down, but this actually works in the opposite way, and I'm going to increase the number on the scale, and I'll just go ahead and set that to 10. You see that the hexagons are smaller, but there's many more of them. So you can adjust that however you want to. I'm going to jump out of the camera and zoom around on this a little bit so we can see it. So there's our first grid using a material that's been applied to a shape. Now this is only a 2D, flat 2D shape. There's no 3D geometry to it. That's one of the drawbacks to using a material. I looked at a couple of different ways to try to create 3D geometry with these shapes, but none of them worked. The nice thing about this is, though, we can take this material and we can wrap it around 3D objects. Let me go back into the camera and I'll start another shape and create a new material. So right down here on our options, I'm going to click on the sphere, and then I'm just going to draw one in real quick. And we should be on that sphere. Make sure it's selected in our outliner. Go into the details. I'm going to zero this out on the location. And then down here on the mesh size, I'm going to set all of these to 300. So make sure that's set to free, and then we can just type in 300 on each of them. I'm just tabbing over. So now I have a perfect sphere. Just like before, we want to create a material for it. So down here in the material type, we'll change this from simple to material designer, and we'll use the PBR and hit continue. Let's go down here to the blend mode, change that over to masked. And again, we'll just close this out real quick and open it back up. Open it by hitting edit with material designer right there. And there's our opacity mask. We can click on that. And right here on the mask option for this layer, we select it, go into the texture, and we can search for that grid texture 2 and select it. It's the inverse of the original one. Now we have all of the hexagons as being invisible and the outline as being visible on this one. I'll set a color for this real quick. Change this to solid color. Drop down here into my color picker. I'll make this maybe kind of a burnt orange and then hit OK. And we'll take a look at this real quick. So there is our honeycomb type grid. Let's save this back into my materials and going to label this grid underscore 02. And we can close this out. You see it's applied to the sphere. The aspect ratio of the hexagons seem to be squashed or stretched, however you're looking at it. So I'm going to go in and fix that a little bit. On that material for that sphere, again, this is the material we were working with. We can drop down here to the Material UV and go to the scale again. This time I do want to set this to free. And then on our X value right there, I'm going to set that to 0.5. And so that's looking a little bit better. I am going to go in and constrain those back together. And so now when we increase this number, they'll stay proportionate and we get a nice look out of our grid. I'll jump out of the camera and navigate around this a little bit so we can see it is completely wrapped around that sphere. I'll go back into the camera and then I'll animate this real quick so we can get a good look at the sphere. So in my sequencer down here, I've set this to 24 frames per second and I've set up 10 seconds in here. And so with my timeline indicator right here at the beginning of the timeline, I'll go into my rotation and set a keyframe for that and then jump to the end of the timeline and set this to 359 degrees and then set this keyframe once again. Now I'm going to make these linear so that they don't ramp up and ramp down. I'm selecting both of the keyframes, going to right click right there, set that to linear. And now we can play back this animation. And you see that it's wrapping nicely around the sphere. There's no seam in it. So this is a nice way of adding the grid look to 3D objects. So now I'm going to take a look at creating grids using 2D and 3D shapes along with a cloner. I'm going to hide these two objects real quick. On this one, I'm going to use a 2D shape. So I'm going to select the regular polygon right there, and I'll just come in here and draw one real quick. And then I'll set it up. Let me make sure that's selected. Go to the details. I'm going to center out this location on it. And then on the mesh size right here, set that to free, and we'll set both of them to 25. I am going to create a 3D shape out of this. I'm going to go into the operator stack for this. If you don't have this tab right here on the operator stack, go over here to the far left side and click that button right there. It will add that in. This is where we get to the modifiers for this 2D shape. Click on Add Modifier, and the first one I want to add is Extrude. I'm going to change the depth to 10 centimeters, and I'm going to add in one more modifier on this one. Let's go down to Bevel. And I'll make some adjustments to it. I'll set the inset. I'll leave the inset at 1, the iterations to 5, and the roundness to 1. We'll go take a look at that real quick. I'm going to jump out of the camera so we can move into that and take a look at what we've created. There's that shape. Go back into our camera, and now we'll add in the cloner for this. Go into the Motion Design Outliner. We'll jump over here to our Motion Design tools, go into Cloners, and double click on the grid. That's going to add in a cloner set up with a grid with this default clone. We're going to get rid of that default clone. Just select it and hit delete. We're going to drag this regular polygon down into the cloner. Click on it, grab it, and start dragging down. And once you see it highlighted like that right there, just let go. That regular polygon becomes a child of the cloner, and that's the object now that the cloner is cloning. We'll make some adjustments to the cloner. Make sure that it's selected. Go into the details panel for it, and we'll drop down here to layout. We're going to leave that on grid. And on the X, Y, and Z count, along with the spacing for those three, we'll make some changes. On count X, let's just set that to 1. On Y, let's set that to 200. And on Z, let's set that to 52. Then on the spacing, we're going to leave X as it is because it doesn't really matter what that one is. And then we'll go down to Y. We'll set this to 25 and Z to 50. Now, you might notice that these are kind of looking like they're laying on top of each other. That has to do with the material that's applied to it right now. So we'll go create a material for this real quick. We'll need to go back into the Motion Design Outliner, go to our regular polygon right there, select it, then go back into the details, and we'll drop down to the material for it. And on the material type, we'll move from Simple to Material Designer. We'll just use the PBR, hit Continue, and I'm just going to make a quick color on this. Go into the base color, change this from a texture to a solid color, and select a color for it. I'll hit OK on that, and then I'm going to save this real quick. Make sure I'm in my materials folder, and we'll just label this blue. We can close that out, and they are rendering properly. Now, I just caught that I need to make this 6 sides. So right there on that polygon, again in the Motion Design Outliner with that regular polygon selected, on the details, the sides right there, I missed this earlier, but let's go ahead and set that to 6 sides rather than 5. And so now we can continue on creating the rest of this. To do that, all we're going to need to do is, since we have this first cloner set up, we'll just duplicate it and then move it slightly. So select it and then hit Control D. Go to that second cloner there. We'll go into the details, and we're going to need to go to the location for it and just make a few adjustments. We'll leave the X as is. On the Y, we're going to set that to 12. And on the Z, we'll set that to 24. Keep in mind that these numbers are based on the size and the spacing that I've set for that regular polygon. So if you're going to create a different sized polygon, you're going to have to figure out the spacing as well as the position of this second cloner once you get to that point. All right, let's jump out of the camera and zoom in on this a little bit. So you can see now we've created this grid with these hexagons. They have 3D geometry to them. So if you're looking for something more like this is a way that you can create this grid look. Keep in mind, this is not going to wrap around other objects. I'll create the inverse of this real quick. Let me jump back into the camera and go to the Motion Design Outliner, and I'm just going to hide those two cloners real quick. And we'll start this process over. Go into the 2D shapes here, and then we'll need this regular polygon. Before we move on, I'll jump into the details for that and change the sides of that to 6. We're going to add some modifiers to this one, just like we did before, but we're going to start off with a different one this time. We're going to add the outline modifier to it. And you can pretty much from there see where I'm headed on this. So I'm going to set the distance down on this one to 2. I'll go back into the modifiers and we'll extrude this and set that back to 10. And then we can bevel it a little bit just to give it some more dimension. I'll leave the inset at 1, the iterations to 2, and the roundness to 2. And all of this is up to preference, whatever you want to do on those. One other adjustment we need to make, we'll go back into the details for this, and we're going to need to change the mesh size of it. On the mesh size, let's make sure that that's constrained on the X and Y, and we'll set this to 50. Now we can add the cloner in, so we'll go back over here to our cloners and double click on that grid. And just like we did before, we'll go into that cloner and delete that default clone and then bring that polygon down into it. Let's go adjust the cloner some. We'll click on it, go to details. We'll leave it on grid and we'll go to the X count and set that to 1. On the Y count, we'll set that to 80. And on the Z count, we'll set that to 30. On the X count, we can leave that as is. And then on the Y count, we'll set this to 47. And on the Z count, we'll set that to 82. Again, all of these numbers are based on the original size of the hexagon that you create and what you do with it as far as the 3D geometry that you create. So you'll have to do a little experimentation if you're going to go with a different size on it. I do need to create a material or add a material to it since I already have one. So back in the Motion Design Outliner, regular polygon, make sure that's selected. Go into the details and we can just add that blue color that we already have. So this time I'll go from simple to asset and we'll search for that MD_blue, and there it is. We can select that, and now it'll render properly using that material. And just like we did before, all we have to do now is go into the Motion Design Outliner, go to that cloner and duplicate it, select it, Control D. We have our second cloner right there, and with it selected, we can go into the details and make a few adjustments on the position for it, and we'll be all lined up. On the X, we'll leave it at 0, and on the Y, we'll set that to a negative 23.5, and on the Z, we'll set that to 41. And so now we've created our honeycomb hexagon style grid. I'll jump out of the camera, and we can just zoom around and take a look at this a little bit. And you have a lot of options on this as far as what you can do with the 3D geometry that you create on it. You can experiment with that and see what you come up with. So for the two that we've created using the cloners, if you want to keep these together so you can move them around or scale them, select both of the cloners and then just go up here to the null object and click on it. And it'll wrap those two cloners and those grids together so that in this null object you can work with them. So if I want to, I can select that, go into the details, and I can begin to scale this down, scale it up, or move it if you want to rotate it, whatever you want to do with that. So on both of them, I'll do that real quick on the other set, select both of them, and then hit the null object right there, and you can label those however you want to. Now, I do need to make these two visible, so let me select that. And you also have control of the visibility over both of them. And so that's an easy way to set these up and work with them. So I went ahead and did a quick animation on this honeycomb grid right here. I just selected it, went into the details, and on the rotation, at the beginning of the sequence, I set a keyframe for rotation and then moved through it. And at the end of it right here, what I originally set up was a pitch right here of 179.5 so that it's just going around halfway. And then on the yaw right here, I set that to 359. And when I clicked on the keyframe right there to set it at the end, it adjusted it to all of this. Not sure why, but just wanted to let you know how I originally set this up. Jump back to the beginning of the timeline, hit play on that, and we get this interesting animation. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little more with this on lighting real quick. I'm just going to pause this, jump back to the beginning, go to the motion design outliner, and in our default scene right here, I'm going to turn off the directional light and the skylight, and then I'll come over here to the lights and just add in a point light real quick. With this point light, I'm just going to go to the details of it, and I'm going to set the brightness up to 48, and then bring this out towards the camera. I'm going to set this to -500 and adjust this attenuation radius down a bit. Let's see, just want it out just a little bit. So we kind of get this vignetting right there. I think I'm going to set that to 700, maybe 750. And let's play our animation and see what that looks like. I hope this has been helpful. For more on motion media design, hit the like and subscribe button and check out my other tutorials.